Gears of War Judgement was released in March of 2013 to overall positive reviews from many critics. However, there was a different perspective from longtime Gears of War fans, regarded as the worst game in the series by many people due to its lackluster campaign, change of playstyle, and removal of long-time mechanics. Today, I wanted to take a look at Gears of War Judgement and see why exactly it was hated so much by the community. I want to start off by saying that I enjoyed Judgement, at least when it first released 7 years ago. Over the years, I have retained fond memories of this game and still believe that it introduced good things to the franchise, the breach shot being one of them, and not too long ago, everybody in the Gears community was excited to see the Bushka make a return to Gears 5, at least until it was confirmed to be a mistake by the developers and it isn't actually coming back. Despite still being a fan of Judgement, I can agree that it is the weakest game in the series, and I can understand why people have so much hate for this game. Let's start by taking a look at who developed this game. Gears of War Judgement was developed by People Can Fly, which had previously helped Epic Games with the Gears of War PC port as well as Gears 2 and 3, but didn't play a major part as they were not credited. Judgement, on the other hand, was the first Gears of War game in which People Can Fly were fully leading development. Prior to this, their notable works were Painkiller and Bulletstorm, both of which received overall positive reviews, with Bulletstorm garnering a bit of a cult following years after its release, and both of these games also happened to be first-person shooters, which might explain why Gears of War Judgement had many FPS game mechanics that just didn't quite fit into Gears of War, which we will be talking about later in the video. On to the campaign, the reason many critics gave this game a positive review in the first place. There are actually two campaigns, although neither of them are substantially long, but let's start with the first campaign for Judgement, which takes place right after the events of Emergence Day. Set before the original Gears of War, this campaign follows Kilo Squad, made up of a young Damien Barrett and Coltrane along with two newcomers, Sophia Hendrick, an Onyx Guard cadet, and Garen Paddock, a former UIR soldier turned COG after the Locusts attacked his hometown. Kilo Squad is put on trial and accused of treason after disobeying orders to not detonate the light mass bomb, and must tell their side of the story. The entire game is told in flashbacks up until the final act when the Locusts attack the courthouse in which the trial is taking place. Overall, it sounds like a really interesting premise, but honestly, this campaign wasn't very memorable. Whereas Gears 1 through 3 had multiple scenes and battles that I still remember to this day, despite not playing them in years, I'm having a hard time recalling any memorable scenes from Judgement other than the final boss. Many people also had an issue with the way Baird was handled. In previous games, he had more of a supporting character with sarcastic one-liners and was an overall smartass to Marcus, more of a comic relief type of character. In Judgement, he was made a stereotypical action movie hero. He was still sarcastic, but it just wasn't the same. The two newcomers, Sophia and Paddock, also didn't leave much of an impact on the series. While replaying the campaign, I completely forgot that you play as both of them for their own respective chapters as they retell their events while on trial. I was honestly surprised to see Paddock make a return in Gears 5. Before we get into the second campaign, we have to talk about declassified missions and stars, an interesting concept that ultimately falls short and could have been executed a lot better. Each level is constantly giving the player a score, and you will be giving a rating from 1 through 3 in the form of stars, depending on how well you did. At the start of each level, the player is given an option to complete an optional challenge. Successfully completing the challenge will increase your score and improve your chances of getting 3 stars. The challenges range from only use a pistol, complete the mission in under 4 minutes, even adding environmental hazards like reduced vision and a gas that causes instant death. This gave Judgement more of an arcade feel and limited the way you could play the game. Do you really like sniping? Well, this challenge doesn't allow the use of long shots. While some challenges aren't too bad and only add extra enemies, challenges like this are not fun at all. Having to play through an entire level while your vision is obscured and you have this groggy feeling is just annoying. It doesn't add anything in my opinion, and trust me, there was tons of declassified missions like this. You could ignore these challenges and just play the game the way you want, but in order to unlock the second campaign, you needed to get a certain amount of stars first, which in a way made the challenges mandatory. Once you collected enough stars, you were able to start the Aftermath campaign. Calling it a campaign is being generous. It was only an extra chapter and shorter than the ROM's Shadow DLC from Gears of War 3. Aftermath takes place years after the Judgement campaign during the final events of Gears of War 3, and it still follows Baird, Cole, and Paddock, but Sophia is now replaced with Clay and Carmine. This mini-campaign gets rid of the star rankings and declassified missions, allowing you to actually play the game at your own pace, but not for very long, as Aftermath is only about an hour long. Aftermath, in my opinion, is the best part this game has to offer as far as single player, but it still felt more like an afterthought. I would have liked to see more from this point of view as Baird and Cole go and seek out extra recruitment during the original trilogy. You know, all that campaign stuff can probably be overlooked, right? Everyone knows multiplayer is what really makes Gears of War games fun. So how did Judgement do? The answer, not so good. Let's take a look at some of the mechanics that were changed. Players now always had a crosshair in the center of their screen, making hipfire more accurate, very similar to FPS games. Active reload bonus was removed. You can still do an active reload in order to reload your weapon faster, but you no longer get a damage buff or fire rate increase. You pick up ammo just by walking over it, there's no need to hold a button. You would now spawn with loadouts, choosing your primary and secondary weapon along with a grenade. The D-pad weapon selection was removed. You no longer had 3 weapons, but instead only 2, and would switch between your primary and secondary by hitting the Y button. Again, much like an FPS game, and grenades were quickly thrown by hitting the bumper instead of switching to them. Don't mean to repeat myself, but all common mechanics of a first-person shooter. Did it at least play like a Gears of War game? No, not at all. Locusts were completely removed from versus, and everyone played as COG soldiers with blue or red armor depending on your team. A big staple of games has always been COG versus Locusts, so removing that aspect made no sense. Executions were also removed from multiplayer due to players no longer going into a down but not out state, but would instead instantly die after taking enough damage. Taking away executions is like robbing Gears of War of its identity. Executions are what makes Gears of War. Maps were much larger and no longer symmetrical like in previous Gears of War games. Maps now had a big emphasis on verticality, with every map having stairs allowing players to climb on top of buildings and overlook big open spaces. They now resembled Call of Duty maps, and the game rewarded more of a run and gun playstyle instead of the cover-based approach the series was known for. Oh yeah, and there was only 4 maps on release, with a free map being added 2 weeks later. For longtime fans of the series, this felt like a huge departure from what they were originally used to, and having only 5 maps on launch got really boring really fast. Judgement did not have a Horde mode, but instead it was replaced by Survival and Overrun. These 2 game modes played the same, but Survival was PvE based and Overrun was focused on PvP. Not something I played very much, but these game modes played on completely different maps than the regular multiplayer, which is why the map pool was so small. You couldn't play survival maps in versus and vice versa. The idea of survival was similar to Horde. 5 players must defend against waves of locusts, the only difference being that there are only 10 waves and the COG must defend an objective. If they fail to defend an objective, they are pushed back and must defend a different part of the map until they beat wave 10 or the locusts destroy all objectives. Overrun was exactly the same, except it gave players the option to play as the locusts, similar to beast mode but against actual players instead of AI. Survival was not as replayable as Horde, but Overrun was one of the more fun game modes in Judgement and Gears of War in general. This game mode is something that I would like to see return in some way into future Gears of War games. Overrun is one of the few good things that I think Judgement introduced to the franchise. And finally, we have cosmetics. This game came out at the start of the loot box and cosmetics craze, which meant loot boxes were introduced to the series, something that Gears of War 4 would build upon. Not only were loot boxes added to the game, but it went overboard with character skins and weapon camos, something Gears of War 3 had done, but not to this extent. This just added on to the hate for the game, as better looking skins were only obtainable by purchasing them with real money, and the decent looking skins were not guaranteed due to them being random rewards from loot boxes. Overall, 2013 was not a great year for Gears of War, with Judgment being their worst selling game in the series, having only sold 425,000 copies in the first month, compared to the previous game selling over 1 million in their first month. After Gears of War 3, so many people were excited to see where the franchise would be going, and sadly, Judgment was a huge departure that not many people stuck around with. I myself didn't even play long enough for the first DLC to come out, and didn't return to the series until Gears of War 4. Overall, Gears of War Judgment had a lot of potential that was ruined by changing too many mechanics that just necessarily didn't need changing, and players had already grown to love. I will still go back and play Gears of War Judgment every couple of years, but the multiplayer is something I would stay far away from. I know it's practically dead at this point, but not even bot matches are fun to play. Is the hate justified for Gears of War Judgment? Probably. In all honesty, you can probably skip this game and not miss out on anything from the Gears of War storyline, as not a lot of points from Gears of War Judgment were memorable, and the multiplayer was too far of a departure from what Gears of War was known for at the time. Although I did enjoy the game back in 2013 and found myself having fun at points while recording footage for this video, I will still say that it is indeed the worst game in the franchise. Let me know your thoughts. Did you enjoy Judgment, or do you also have fond memories of it back from when it came out in 2013? And even if you don't absolutely hate it but understand why it gets so much hate, let me know in the comments below. If you made it to this point in the video, I just want to say thank you. This video was tons of fun to make, and let me know if you want to see more of this type of content, and not just for Gears of War games, but if there's any other game you would like me to do a review on just like this, then I will gladly do it, as Gears of War isn't the only game I play. But if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you haven't subscribed already, please do so, as it really helps me out. And as always, hope you have a good one, and catch you all next time.